Hello, Mgtow. Hello, men. This is Howard Dare. Thanks for stopping by. So, it occurs to me that in my last video, Turning Men into Lions, just a brief introduction and analysis of Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, that I didn't actually get to the part where it talks about turning men into lions, right? So I figured I'd do a part two. You didn't think it would be like that easy, did you? From man into a lion with just one YouTube video? No, it's going to take 2 YouTube videos to do that. So I got you covered there. So I'm going to read this section of the study guide analysis and then talk about how it relates to Mgtow. Thus spoke Zarathustra's summary and analysis of Part 1, speeches 1 through 11. I'm just going to read a few of them. Part 1 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra consists of the prologue and a series of speeches that Zarathustra delivers. The speeches are written to resemble the sayings of the biblical prophets, as well as ancient philosophical literature. The style is meant to remind the reader of a sermon or a homily. Zarathustra gives brief meditations and visions that allude to the teachings of Jesus and Socrates. The speeches cover a wide variety of topics and issues, but all are written to further the purpose of helping people to live better lives. Zarathustra tells the crowd in the prologue to live lives that remain true to the meaning of the earth. Between speeches, there are brief moments of narration. Below, each speech is summarized and analyzed. Of the 3 metamorphoses. Zarathustra begins his first speech by describing the 3 stages through which a soul moves during its transformation. The use of the word metamorphoses, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, metamorphosis has a double meaning here. Metamorphosis is the act of a change, which this parable certainly deals with. But metamorphoses are also brief mythical allusions, first used by the Roman poet Ovid. The metamorphoses of the soul can best be described as a person's spiritual journey. The soul first becomes a camel carrying heavy burdens. Then the soul transforms again into a lion. Finally, the lion becomes a child. The camel is a beast of burden, and it represents the burdens that the laws and morality of religion place on individuals. These strictures carry the individual's soul into the desert. There, the soul transforms into a lion, fighting for its freedoms from the restrictions of religion. The lion fights viciously against the ingrained traditions of a society. The transformation of the soul into a lion is necessary to cast off the burdens of the camel. The soul must then become an innocent child once again, seeking truth. By becoming a child again, the soul is able to gain its own sense of morality, not the morality imposed by religion. At the end of this speech, Zarathustra goes to a town called the Motley Cow. Okay, so that was the speech that I was referring to in the title there. And what an interesting idea that is. And, I'm of course applying this to the idea of gynocentrism as opposed to religion, and as to going Mgtow as opposed to, the overman. And you can see the parallels where the Mgtow is going against the worship of the women and going against the traditions of the society. And you can also see where these burdens and this conditioning and these expectations of the man's behavior, of his willingness to sacrifice himself, to carry these burdens for women and the society. I was dealing with a woman in the comments section, and she was talking about how for, hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, women have been mistreated by men, and this goes to this whole idea of what, do you want to count, all, male on female sex throughout the animal kingdom as, domination and abuse? And the answer is, yeah, they sure do, right? So it's this idea of casting off just this burden that is forced upon the men that has nothing to do with the individual man. And this act, the man has to become the lion. He has to become Mgtow. The individual has to become Mgtow. They have to go their own way from the system that is exploiting them. Otherwise, this system will exploit them to the end. So I thought that was a great, parable right there. Okay, let's read a couple more of these speeches, though, and, the analysis of the speeches, and talk about how they might, relate to Mgtow and the situation that we currently find ourselves in. Okay, here's another one. On the teachers of virtue. Upon entering the town, Zarathustra goes and sits at the feet of a wise and virtuous old man. The old man is teaching the town's youth of the great virtue of sleep. To the old man, nothing is more virtuous. The old man teaches that in order to attain such sleep, a person must keep 40 other virtues and think of them at night. Only when one realizes these virtues can he fall asleep. Zarathustra thinks that this teaching is nonsense. He correctly identifies the logic of the teaching as this. Living life during the day is only something one does until that person can sleep. Zarathustra says that the only situation in which he can imagine following such teaching is that if life has no meaning and if I have to choose nonsense. This passage contrasts Zarathustra's teaching to the philosophy of teachers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. These philosophers taught that life was something to be overcome because, for Zarathustra, life does have a purpose, and he plans to teach this purpose to his disciples. Okay, so there's another one, and I don't fully understand all of this. I tried to read this book, and I got to about the third chapter before I, just couldn't understand it. So, I appreciate these, brief summaries and analysis. But again, this, I believe we could refer to the idea that if you confront someone's worldview that they are blindly following the traditions of their civilization and their group, perhaps to their own, demise and to their own destruction, right? There's the source of there's one of the sources of red pill rage. If you confront a person with that, they're going to become angry. I mean, really angry at a fundamental level. It's not like an argument you can win. It's like challenging their worldview and their sense of themselves, because if they're wrong, then their entire worldview is wrong. And, that's how hard they're going to fight. That's how hard they're going to shame you. So keep that in mind. And I'm also aware that I'm just kind of like borrowing little aspects from these speeches and applying them to Mgtow, and that in their, if I understood them more, they probably wouldn't apply. But I'm okay with that. Okay, let's read that. Zarathustra has harsh words for anyone who teaches people to despise the human body. He says that he does not want these teachers to learn his own philosophy. Instead, he thinks that they should simply follow their teachings and die. Zarathustra tells his listeners that only children believe in a soul. According to Zarathustra, there is only a body, and within that body is the self. The self is the ruler of the body, the essence of humanity. The self controls the ego, which in turn controls the pleasures and pains of life. What the self wants most of all is to create beyond itself. In this speech, Zarathustra compares a person's body to a kingdom, in which the self is the absolute ruler of everything. Zarathustra's teaching presents a complication, however. If the self were the ultimate ruler of a person's body, why would it create pain at all? How could ending one's existence be explained? Zarathustra answers that one who has decided to despise the body has led that person's self to despise his own existence. This, in turn, leads to the desire for self-destruction. Well, that's very complex, but probably... Well, if you're taught to hate the body, and to despise the body, actually, no, it's not that complex. Okay, so, that's something for the individual to certainly give some thought to. On the Pale Criminal, where he talks about justice. On Reading and Writing. On the Tree on the Mountain. On the Preachers of Death. On War and Warriors. Here. In this speech, Zarathustra addresses what is required of a disciple. Zarathustra tells his disciples that a person must fight to continue to grow and ascend into a greater being. One must hold envy and hate in his heart, just as warriors do, against those who have already ascended higher. Zarathustra loves his disciples, but he also teaches them how to engage in war in order to become overmen. Okay, complicated stuff, right? Not just cut and dry, simple things. You're going to have to think these things out. Absolutely. And let me read this one because I think it really applies towards Mgtow. On the New Idol. In order to gain full control over the hearts and minds of his disciples, Zarathustra knows that he must break the ideas and affiliations that his disciples held before they became his followers. The first conviction that Zarathustra must break is the dependence upon the new democratic state. The state is the new idol. Loyalty to a democratic state has overtaken belief in God as the chief idol of society. Zarathustra tells his disciples that people are the true noble creatures, not states. People serve life, he says, but a state only serves death by sending men to war and by lusting after 100 appetites. In this speech, Nietzsche levels a criticism against thinkers such as John Locke, who writes of the modern commercial state. The state, Nietzsche writes, is generous to people who bow down and worship it. Zarathustra insists that to ascend to the state of the overman, one must overcome loyalty to the state. One must be loyal to the individual instead. Okay, so there you go. And that's just a brief summary, of some of these speeches and ideas. And I'd like to say, on this last one, if you just replace the word, state with, women, I think you've got a useful tool for looking at what we're dealing with right now, because the men are worshiping the women are worshiping the state, and the state is ruling over the men, and the women are ruling over the men, and the men have to learn to go their own way. But most will bow down to this system, to go along with this system, and they will be rewarded, right? They will serve their masters well, and they will be rewarded, but it will lead to their destruction. It's a false god. So what I'm also thinking is that this idea, of Nietzsche's that God is dead, we could, extract a universal truth out of that. And, perhaps he's just saying that it's a false idol, right? So we don't have to take him literally. We can take him symbolically, right? So now how does this apply towards women, right? Because the man, his idol, what he worshiped, what he thought was so pure and so good, is false. And he realizes that. And now he has to go his own way, find his own way. He has to, instead of his loyalty to his biology and to women and to the state, no, he has to become loyal to himself. And that men are in fact the noble creatures, not the women, not the state. Now, as a young dependent growing up, how's he going to come to this state? How's he going to come to this information? He's not. He's going to hide, these basic truths from himself. He really is. And the system is going to hide these truths from him. And who's to say that a man can't go through the entire life, without hitting the bad parts? That's certainly what, most men are trying to do initially, isn't it? I don't know if this makes sense, but that's what I was thinking relating, to some of these speeches. But go ahead and check them out yourself, and I'll point to them in the description below. And let me know what you think about this in the comments section below. And please like, share, comment, subscribe, donate, and join me again, Howard Dare, as I plan to have more content for you. Thank you, Mgtow.